Yeah, so I'm Brennan Lodge. First time at this conference. Been going on for 14 years. Congrats. This feels like Avengers Assemble, right? Well, we've got ISACA, ISA, InfraGard. Which groups am I missing? Yeah, 12 different ones. It's crazy. So awesome to be here. Security Awareness Month. Spooky Halloween tomorrow. Got candy. It's great. So yeah, Brennan Lodge. We're gonna be doing a little bit of rage. Awesome to see some students here learning about cybersecurity. The industry I think is still strong and well. This is no State of the Union address, but I know students right now are a little on edge, as you should be with AI. But there still is strength in security and security jobs out there. The industry needs you guys. So keep your studies up, and the journey is difficult. It's an uphill battle. But keep your head down. Keep an always learning type of methodology, because this industry is changing so much day by day, minute by minute, especially with the AI models coming out. So I'll step off the soapbox here and we'll rage on. But first off, folks from New York, you raise your hand. All right, great. So good New York crowd. Folks from Jersey. Okay. Did you guys use TLS coming through the tunnel? Because if not, we're going to revoke your access and send you back. Okay. All right. First dad joke. There will be more. All right. So a little bit about me. Yeah, so I'm Brennan Lodge. A quick who is lookup. Currently CISO at Manhattan Institute, a nonprofit policy think tank. I run information security there, but have mostly been in the banks. I've worked at J.P. Morgan, Federal Reserve Bank in New York, Bloomberg, Goldman, and HSBC. And like many of you students, did a bit of a career shift about halfway through, went back and got my master's at NYU in a thing at the time, which is called data science, right? If you guys remember those terms of machine learning and prediction and big data. But now everything under the AI umbrella, right? So let's remember those terms, because that's where really AI came from. Yeah, so at the banks, as I was saying, the career switch, started doing data science, so bringing in realistic use cases of, first off, metrics, analytics, and then into prediction, mostly helping on the blue side and SOC. And then evolved quite a bit, building out some R&D teams like at Goldman and HSBC, supporting a larger remit of multiple use cases using machine learning and AI. So things like GRC, which we'll talk about, helping out the vulnerability management team, and just context, right? Context is king, and the ability to have that transparency, which AI kind of lacks, for the analyst, for whomever is investigating, is really important. And keeping that context short, sweet, to the point, rather than scrolling through the 100 tabs that we have open in Chrome to find that nuanced information that we need to solve that investigation. So that's what I've been focusing on. Professor at NYU as well, won some awards in research, in particular for RAG. I was kind of lucky just going down the rabbit hole. A friend of mine tossed over a use case and said, "Hey, Brennan, check out RAG." I said, "What does that even mean?" It sounds a little dirty. Like, no, it's retrieval augmented generation. It's not as complicated as it sounds, and we'll do a little bit of a deep dive there. Anybody use LinkedIn Learning for classes? Cool. Good. Of course, we're in academia. Yeah, so I've got 2 LinkedIn Learning classes, one on RAG, one on MCP. Feel free to check them out or come up to me afterwards. I'll get you a link, and you'll make sure it's free for you. All right. Yeah, real quick, all views are my own, and I have my employer at the Manhattan Institute. All right, let's rage. The agenda. So we did the who is. We'll talk about RAG, how to roll your own. And this is a takeaway that I want you guys to have of, hey, these AI for cybersecurity use cases are real. You've got to start small and build on them. And they're pretty affordable, at least right now. So we'll talk about some of the workflow, how to host it, the cost breakdown, and of course, another AI acronym I'll throw at you, MCP, Model Context Protocol, and some use cases. I've got an open source use case called Arsenal Forge that I'm happy to share. and then we'll take some questions. So where are we at with AI? We'll talk through the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good, like I was talking about, context. Hey, we've got information overload, 24/7 needs of follow the sun model with the SOC and information security, breach after breach. Look, we need freaking help. The attackers are using AI, so why not fight fire with fire? Of fighting the offense with a little bit of AI power on the defensive side. Of course, the talent gap. I'd love to see the cybersecurity programs at the universities, even the community colleges, but they need to evolve with the industry. So refresh, like every new quarter for new classes. And the burnout. So on the opposite side of just the overwhelming queue of getting the queue to zero, which is next to impossible, but the ultimate goal, and the stress that comes with it of working those late shifts, and you get an alert that is considered high severity, and then being on the clock where I was at the Federal Reserve, and we literally had a stopwatch to make sure that we took care of that alert if it was a high severity. If not, we were kind of punished for not solving that in the right amount of time. So yeah, the goal for AI, I think, should be to empower that rapid context, enhance decision making, and easing that strain and the burnout. And of course, with AI, it's going to be complex for the integration. Do we use just a chat bot and ask cybersecurity questions? Do we roll our own? Do we build our own LLM? Do we retrain and fine tune an LLM so we make it specific? The answers and miles are going to vary, but I'll get into it in a bit. Start small. Start with a small use case, a POC, and build from that. And if you get too complex where you're trying to solve with the same model, things like the blue team defense on top of vulnerability management, on top of RAG, on top of GRC, you're doing it wrong. So we'll get into that. All right, and look, if it works, why do we even touch it, right? So if our security is working, why even use AI? Kind of like this, I think is a switch or a router. We still got the green blinky lights. It's working. And there could be a dead mouse in there, and the dust is gathering. But what do? Do we pivot? Do we just focus on something new? So like Salt Bay, and I've been at 12 or 13 conferences this year speaking on this topic, and I always take a run through the vendor floor and talk with some of the vendors as far as what are you doing with AI? And the majority of them are just being like Salt Bay here and sprinkling AI. Is it really AI? Most likely, sometimes not. But what are we doing AI for in cybersecurity? Is it SOAR 2.0? Is it the next gen of the next gen of the next gen firewall with AI, right? Like how many times are we going to, swallow this silver bullet of vendor marketing terms, right? So another takeaway is, hey, let's push back on some of these vendors that are sprinkling AI in and ask, hey, what is the transparency? Can I modify the prompts? Can I engineer on the back end? How was this evaluated? How was this model trained? What data did you use? The questions are endless, but let's push back because I feel like we're at inflection point in our industry that, yes, AI is going to change things, but it's got to be changed for good. So, answer those third-party risk reviews. Put in an AI, questionnaire if you're going to, bring in an AI product. And, let's not just do it for the sake of automation. Yeah, so in addition to Salt Bay sprinkling AI, we've got Jensen here. He's sprinkling in tokens. In his last big keynote speech, he mentioned tokens 85 times. So what does that really mean? And this reminds me a lot of when cloud was coming out and the lack of transparency, especially when it comes to cost. So the DBUs, right? What the heck does that mean? How much does a performance really cost? Because we've got to take that and provide ROI back to the CISOs of, hey, do we implement this? What's it going to cost? What kind of value? What kind of time save are we going to get back? And these, token costs are, there's no transparency. And the definition of a token is, not defined because it could be a phrase. It could be, one word. So push back on the vendors when it comes to cost as well. And last but not least, the ugly. Who remembers Clippy? Nice. I'm dating myself a little bit. But Clippy reminds me a lot of the AI chatbots. Hey, do you need help? Hey, they're popping up everywhere. And just go away, right? Every AI instance seems to have a chatbot, but let's make it useful. Let's customize it. Let's keep it refrained into a particular use case instead of what every AI model, at least the popular ones, have this broad understanding of knowledge. And don't get me wrong, they're great and good, but having to be more focused. And if you're asking why is the sky blue to your cybersecurity model, you should refrain from even answering that question and make sure that it's staying on topic. All right, so when I've been asking CISOs out there what their dilemma is with the ugly of AI, it's a few things. Hey, we're scrambling to come up with an AI policy because it's ever evolving, and the marketing team needs this model, and the finance team needs this model. So how do we apply a blanket statement? Or how can we even stop our users from using ChatGPT? And yeah, you can block it, put in proxy rules and the firewall, and block OpenAI. But folks are just going to go to their phones and ask the questions to make their jobs easier. So the answer is we've got to implement it. If you can't beat them, join them. So how do we do it? And how can we trust it? And how can we explain it? So there's three things I like to boil it down to. Secure, be timely, and costly. On the secure, it's what all of us security practitioners are asking. Can it be transparent? Can we audit it? Can we log it? Can we avoid the hallucinations? And as far as time, we want it to be instant retrieval, lack of legacy response or latency with their responses. And can we keep our data in-house, in our VPC? Without asking the questions and throwing it out into the open internet of those questions about our code and intellectual property that we want to keep in-house. And then last but not least, cost. So can we lower the consumption model? Can it work well with our current cloud implementation? And does it scale? Because there's going to be more than one AI project in your company. My take, AI is a guide, not a particular full-on stop guard. There's a really good book by Ethan Mollick called Co-Intelligence. I highly recommend you read it. And it's about that partnership, that co-intelligence of how to implement, but keeping the human in the loop, keeping the human the ultimate decision maker as we should. So this agentic AI and this automation, hey, let's put in some safeguards here. And if it's a click of a button, great. At least that click of a button can be logged because hopefully a human did it. And that's really important. Being that ally. And don't get me wrong, we've got to democratize our tools. We want it to be real time. We want to avoid the hallucinations, that rapid analysis, and be data driven. So why not stitch together, like I was saying, democratize our data? So an example of, hey, we've got our CISA alerts coming through. We've got MITRE ATT&CK. We're using a NIST, information security practices. We can put that into a vector database, and I'll get into that in a bit with RAG, and it will scale. And you can keep it on-prem. It can be your data to use it. So RAG. All right, retrieval augmented generation. The way I like to explain it is a library. I know many of us haven't been back before, but there's three main components within the RAG and within a library. We have a sentence embedding model. So who remembers the Dewey Decimal System? Yeah, going a little old school. Nobody. Okay, thank you. Good, we're paying attention. All right. Yes, so a sentence embedding model, the translation of vectors from your words and interpreting them in semantic search with a vector database. The vector database huge and powerful technology within itself and on its own, but powered with an LLM and a sentence embedding model. We've got the trifecta and RAG. So the LLM, your librarian, the vector database, your orchestration of books, and they're organized into genres. Back to the Dewey Decimal System, we've got our authors, our titles, our ISBN numbers. This all commingles into a technique within AI to manage your own data. Look for your own data, retrieve your own data. But why? Why would we want to do RAG instead of just a standalone LLM? Well, like Kermit the Frog here, we want to avoid the hallucinations. And the standalone LLMs are standalone. They were created, with a snapshot in time. Once that LLM is cut and fine-tuned and trained, hey, that binary is static. In order to update it, you need to spend a lot of resources to fine-tune it with new data. And yes, we've got MCP in the mix, and yes, we're making routes out to the internet to enrich that content, but the LLM alone needs to be refreshed. Otherwise, it's going to be static and stale. So RAG enables LLMs to incorporate the latest data. We can get a real-time feed into the vector database through some chunking of the PDFs, of our emails, of our own data sources. And it's vectorized, and we can do semantic search. A semantic search looks for similarities amongst the themes and the context, rather than just index searching or static searches like old school databases that the vector databases are outperforming. And then we can use personalized insights and tailor that data for specific answers. So let's go a little bit deeper with this funnel here and stay on topic with a RAG technique. So we want to reduce the lag time. So how about threat detection? We've got feeds from all of the threat intel providers. Let's funnel them into our vector database and get some context out of it. When I started with this, I had an objective to solve, I wanted to get a response within 10 seconds. This is 2 summers ago, so it's quite faster now, and keep the costs under $500 per month with a cloud instance, all while using a GPU. When you're toying around with different GPUs, just use NVIDIA. It's so much simpler and easier. I know why it's a $1 trillion company, because they make their products, the hardware, for the developers. It interacts really well with Python, your libraries. I tried AMD. I tried to do the cheap route, and I was banging my head against the monitor because of the Python dependency hell, right? Of this version of a module didn't work with this driver of AMD. It was just a mess. And I was able to get the NVIDIA working up and running, and roll my own. So over to the cost, I used some of my lab rats, aka some of my students, to help me out with testing out the RAG solution. And just to give some context, I had about 20 students, and they were asking a variety of different questions around threat intel, and scope that into like a typical SOC. And they were asking these questions, so I was able to get a median, questions and the tokens used per question with the response. And we break it down, to host your own within your VPC. It was around $500 a month, using this G4DN for extra large AWS instance with NVIDIA GPU. I think it's still around. And then did the benchmark of, all right, so if instead of using our own GPU and went out to ChatGPT and used the API, it actually was $100 more. And this was using the GPT 3.5 model, which is a lot cheaper now. But my point is that the cost still marginally a little bit more expensive. But let's not forget that we're handing out that information to the World Wide Web and to those that are training the models at OpenAI of our own intellectual property. So how do you put a cost of your own data? There's patent lawyers to solve that for us. But I think you get the point. So talked about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, the trifecta, sentence embedding model, vector database, and LLM and integration. And of course, we've got another acronym, model context protocol. So the way I like to explain it, and I don't want to break anything, but it's like your USB-C converter that we all have to use because of the dongles that Apple and all the other products make us use to interact with some of the proprietary products out there. But that's what it is. It is a protocol. There's a server, there's a client and a host, and I'll explain that in a bit. And it does the translation. It's a communication protocol using JSON RPC version 2, and it's simple to use, and it interacts with the models and interacts with similar to what we were doing with RAG, but other data sources, other applications for you to get that real-time information. The server is somehow asleep or hidden. I don't know why. But the host. So this starts the communication in MCP, and then the client is the orchestration, right? So that USB-C dongle. Sorry, we got a low battery. Hopefully I can make it through. And then the server is hosting that data. So let's take a look at an example. The weather, right? Hey, let's show us the current weather. That host is making that question. The client is orchestrating and doing the routing of, okay, I've got a question about weather. Where do I go to get that data? Well, we're going to go to this server, which is hosting real-time, minute-by-minute data, and we also need some context. So based off of the question from the host, let me translate and try to get an understanding of where this host is located. They're in New York City, so we're going to feed New York City weather back to that host. All right, now some use cases. I've got an open source project. It's called Arsenal Forge. I built this for the MCP class that I taught with LinkedIn Learning. It's a great overview and a realistic use case. The use case being, I've got all these threat intel sources. I need to make sense out of them. I don't want to have to read all of the 10-page threat reports about APT 34 and then figure out which country is associated with, what APT attacker is associated with. No, just bring me all of that knowledge at once so I don't have to look at multiple windows. So we've got faster, smarter, and more informed defenses. And with that, yeah, it should be on. Okay. Yeah, with that, we take the MITRE, we take detection inventory, and we use MCP. So we put it in the vector databases that are separate, use the routing, and based off of an alert like the Move It vulnerability. What is that? It's a old school vulnerability, but hey, do we have a MITRE attack for that? Do we have a detection, which is important? If you don't, you should probably write one. And what's the latest CISA advisory? So with MCP on the back end, you can get all that information all at once. That enriches your analyst, and you're solving that hopefully alert quicker and cheaper. The other thing that MCP you can start up with a server is the history, right? So you're recording every question that was asked, every alert that came through, and a feedback loop in the mix to see how well the analyst scored it as a false positive, as a true positive. And that alone is the logging and the transparency and the question and answer from your RAG system. So we've got shake and bake for the win. Some more cybersecurity use cases, it reminds me of GRC, right? The ugly baby. And apologies on the picture here, it's very cringeworthy, but so is GRC. And look, GRC is tough, it's difficult, but the models out there are for language. And language is the majority of regulations, laws, and policies and procedures and evidence and justifying that. But still keeping in tune, which is the chart that you see here. And even with the current administration that says they're pulling back on on laws and regulations, that answer is, quite false, amongst other things. But these are state laws within the last 5 years, and of course the big upticks are in AI laws, and the most is in cybersecurity laws. So the point here, like, we got to stay ahead. We have to stay current and modify our policies with just staying compliant. So one way to do that is to find a treasure trove of these policies. And this was like a little research project of mine that I did, for one, training a model and a classification model. I'll get into that in a sec. But the UN has a really good dashboard on their data protection and privacy legislation worldwide. And go figure, the majority of the world has e-transaction laws and cybercrime laws, but they're lacking in consumer protection laws. So the research that I was trying to do, was sift out what are the similarities and differences, and what are some of the themes across these regulations and laws, so that we can boilerplate this into our GRC program, into our trust center, and use that and modify it and update it in our RAG system in the event regulations are changing, just to stay ahead. So why not use the world's laws to build out our banking policies for cybersecurity and data privacy? And lo and behold, this was a really good treasure trove of data to use for training classification models. So I put this into the vector database, and also created a BERT model to do gap analysis. Now we're quick on BERT. No, it's not the Sesame Street character. It is a model we're all familiar with in text complete, autocomplete, and emails and everything else. But you can fine tune a foundation BERT model to compare and contrast two different languages of text, keeping in the same language here. So for example, the regulation of NYDFS as it relates to our policies, and create gaps. So what we see here in the colored boxes are scores or percentages of classification likelihood that on the left here is SOC 2 domains, and how does it compare with our employee handbook. So a huge time saver of uploading our policies against the classification model that's been trained against SOC 2 or DORA or any other regulation of your choice, to find out how are we doing. And if we're low, say 50% or lower, we may have to modify that policy because it doesn't abide by regulation. And this is a really good way to do your gap analysis, especially if you're just getting started. A similar method is, still using BERT, is what if we have a new regulation, but there's no framework for it? From the research I did, it turns out a lot of the data privacy, cybersecurity laws are built on the framework of a combination of ISO, NIST, CSF, and SOC 2. And just by those three, we can use the tables, the control, trust, service criteria, for each of the domains within those frameworks, and compare it against a new regulation that came out. So the SHIELD Act, you guys familiar with that one? Yeah, New York one. It's kind of hard to understand. And as CISOs or GRC practitioners, when this new regulation comes out, you get the agita and anxiety of, just tell me what I freaking need to do with my security practices and controls. So using this method, we can create a framework that I'm calling a compliance notebook that uses those three frameworks as the bedrock, and we can get them in a table type format. This is my GRC open source project. It's called Audit Caddy. It's on GitHub. I've got 50 policy templates, some starter packs to get you started, and some of the state regulations that I've translated into those custom control frameworks based off of the three I mentioned. All of the data protection laws that are from the UN that I've also translated. And I'm starting to work on some nuanced ones within the industry. The only thing I say is take something, leave something, right? Which we'll probably do tomorrow with the candy, right? You don't want the kids coming in and stealing all the candy, right? Even if you just leave that jack-o'-lantern out. So if you've got some templates out there, please don't put in your company name or anything. Wipe that clean, and of course no PII. But this is a method for me. Look, I've used a lot of the training data from the UN and elsewhere, and I wanted to make this open. So it's my giving back, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. And look, last but not least, we talked about at least two use cases. One on the SOC side for the blue team, and enriching your threat intel and putting it all in one place. We talked about GRC, multiple use cases within GRC, gap analysis, getting the regulatory tables and controls into one-stop shop. And look, for now, it's cheap. You can do it. If you're sitting on the sidelines, you're going to lose. Your competitors are going to gain. There's going to be some hiccups along the road. The breaches are every day. I have a feeling AI kind of breach is among us. It's not a matter of if, but when. The battery did run out, even though we're green, but good timing. But how am I doing on timing? I get 20 minutes. Okay. But yeah, so we've got to do it. We've got to implement it. And I've got some open source projects to help out. But I know I was pretty quick. How about we open it up to some questions?
Introduce yourself. Sure. My name is Andrew, and I just graduated in December with a cybersecurity degree, and I have an app that I do use AI for tabletop exercises. Oh, cool. So it's kind of a gimmick, but it uses text to speech and has a chatbot. But it's pretty nicely, conveniently packaged, and kind of streamlines the process and empowers and scales. So that's the point of it. AI helps it to scale, I think. So, but I use Bedrock, and I'm using AI in the cloud, right? And now I'm a startup. I'm trying to find people to test it, so the costs aren't too much. How do you view using cloud for AI? Because I see you were talking about using your own GPUs, and you're talking about tokens. You're bringing down the cost, and that's really important. And I'm looking to scale eventually, be like have more people using my app, and then that would be important. But how do you see cloud with AI?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question, and awesome to hear you graduated and in the startup space. Keep up the hustle there. But it just goes back to one of the problems with AI, which is the lack of transparency. It's kind of relating it to cloud and the costs there. Just test the crap out of your product and use almost like regression testing, right, to performance test it, but also get the happy medium of what on average folks are doing when making those requests, and try and benchmark it. So I have a recording and a log of all the events where folks are using the different AI features of my product, and one is good for audit and logging, but two, it's good for me to figure out how much it's costing me, right? With the tokens. So figure out that formula, whatever model, and the tokens and cost of 0.001 penny, whatever, and then on average trying to figure it out, and then put a limit to the client of, hey, you've run out of tokens, because you got to figure out how much is costing you, and if you go over that, you don't want to have a surprise like cloud bill or now an AI bill of a couple thousand because somebody kept pressing the button and asking the same question over and over again, right? So old school tactics, you've got to put these alerts in place, but it's just for new tech. But yeah, you got to manage your pennies as a startup founder. Good question.
Hi, Brennan. Kevin O'Connor. Hey, thanks for the presentation. Along the same lines about managing the pennies, I saw some news reporting recently that that we're on the cusp of a huge explosion in the cost just to run these models.
Yeah.
It was the parallel was driven around sort of Uber in the early days, where they were sort of running the industry underwater to sort of get the traction, and then we all saw our really inexpensive midtown rides like quadruple. That being said, do you take much stock in that, or do you think that we've got a bit of a bubble in a way that we have to work through as all this great technology plays out here?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We've got to save the environment at what cost, right? For the AI overlords. It reminds me a lot. Go figure. I was in the crypto industry for a little bit and thought about the Bitcoin mining. Kind of regret it, like financially now. But the cost on the environment is huge, and then you get into the company's strong arming and like the Spider-Man meme of I'm paying you $1 billion, you're paying me $1 billion so I can get your chips, and you're giving me a data center, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, it feels like the internet bubble all over again, and there will be some consolidation. And yeah, who's ever got the finances to run the GPUs? But they've got to get like efficient, right? Kind of like Moore's law, right? As the technology grows, hopefully the efficiency comes back. And yeah, it's really tough right now as far as which model to choose. Each of them has their own specialty, and then the wrappers of models and applications. Again, push back on the vendors. Try and ask them for transparency for the ROI, ask what a token is, and the usage, and allow for the customization. If the vendor pushes back and says, no, we're doing this behind the scenes in a black box and we can't tell you, then I would say go to another vendor. A great question. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. My question's on, you alluded to, we don't want our engine to answer a blue sky, right, when it's really about security. So, given the fundamental problem of prompt injection, right, we haven't solved that problem. And we see vendors coming out with these monitoring to help mitigate, no, you can't do that. But it sounds like you're also saying context would help. So I guess what's your take on how to best today mitigate?
Yeah. So twofold. One on the prompting and two on the defense, right? How about this old school tactic of SQL injection? Very similar to prompt injection. And what did we do to avoid SQL injection? Right? We took out those like weird characters and the drop table and just making sure not just monitoring for it, but just blocking at first, right? So when you're asking questions like why is the sky blue? No, like go back, like you don't belong here. Don't ask that kind of question. So yeah, we've got to be tough. And on prompting in general, you've got crazy acronyms. You've got company lingo that isn't really recognized by the modern LLMs. So I get a lot of the juice from the squeeze. The squeeze being prompt engineering. And trial and error there by putting in those acronyms with a definition as to what it means for your company, that company lingo within the prompt. And you've got to iterate among it, log it, see what kind of questions are being asked. Those supervisors and managers out there need insight about what their team is asking of their LLMs. And maybe that could be an educational moment. Go figure, like outside of AI, where that manager can step in. Hey, Brennan, I saw you asking this question about the move it of vulnerability, and you did it multiple times. Let's sit down and talk about it, and maybe I can explain it to you as well. Go figure, like human to human interaction that we're learning out of the questions we're asking AI to improve with that education. So prompting, I get a lot of mileage out of that. And let's use some of the old school tactics like SQL injection and defense there for prompt injection. But great question.
All right, raise your hand. Ted, did you have a question? Sure. Okay, I thought you did.
Ted, nice to meet you. Ted and I go way back, by the way.
Good to see you again, Brennan. Great talk. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So, this is great. These open source things that you've put out there, I'm going to be definitely downloading and playing with them and learning. Thank you. I look at RAG as, another way to add context, of course, and MCP, yet another way to add context, agentic AI, a third way to add context where, an LLM is a probability engine at the end of the day, non-deterministic.
Yes.
We're trying to bolt on determinism with the context. So 2 + 2 stops equaling bacon, and it equals 4, like it's supposed to. What else do you see on the horizon from a context perspective? What's coming, in your opinion?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, good question.
I like the non-deterministic piece, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the whole psychology and like matrix style of machines and how we benefit from them and teach them from it. Yeah, I mean the context is king. These two new protocols, I'm still trying to wrap my head around them. So I'm sorry, the one protocol MCP and the other RAG, and keeping them on-prem within your network, and the trial and error there. The agentic stuff kind of scares me, especially when there's no human in the loop and we're giving the authorization of these models to act independently. And yeah, so you got to bake in that transparency, that logging, that monitoring, and let's not make it an easy button, because they will act in the wrong way. And how do you pull back from it, right? What's the kill switch to these models and agentic? And we need to integrate and implement that within just our security controls. And that's up to us, right? Like, hey, we're as security practitioners, we're pumping the brakes on AI. And yes, I told you about how to use AI for cybersecurity, but on the reverse, let's continue to put in these safeguards and monitor as much as we can. So the context for AI, I would say, is the opposite of logging and actually reading those logs, and hey, maybe getting some help from your models as to what types of themes and questions are being asked, and sifting through that, and then putting some blocks in like ML operations, right? So we've got DevOps, DevSecOps. Now we've got ML ops in place to monitor how our models are reacting. And it's tough because this is all subjective about how AI is answering those questions. How do you evaluate? And I get that question a lot with my Audit Caddy product of, how accurate is your model, Brennan? I'm like, I don't freaking know. Like, it's super subjective. And I try to put it in like an easy way to score. So you guys saw it before, where I was doing the classification by percentage, and that just offers up criticism of what does these values mean. And yes, you're getting a bit more nuanced, but then I implemented just high, medium, and low confidence levels of the gaps and the classification, and that seemed to be a lot more like digestible for the end user. And of course they're clicking on the high confidence, but they also got to determine, hey, the medium fits as well, and maybe even the low, but they still had to click, right, instead of the agentic stuff that is automatically going to classify. And that's when you get into overfitting, where the model is just acting haywire because it's trained on the same thing over and over and over again. So you've got to add variety into the mix and the non-deterministic human activity. Thanks, Ted.
All right,
Yeah.
hold on. I thought Mike was going to ask a question, but
Well, Mike, you have a question? So, will there ever be a GameStop moment with AI? Meaning the point where the model or the training data is so corrupted and so skewed, too much Reddit, right?
Yeah.
That we're just going to have to abandon it and start over.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. When there's too many cat memes out there, right? And I love some of the trolling on the web scraper defenses out there that the AI models are now being blocked. And yeah, like they say this is fake news, even though it's real news. Like, so yeah, I like how you put that with the GameStop movement, and like the Gen X or millennials or whoever is running that. Yeah, it's smart. And yeah, there's going to be an eventual collapse of the intelligence from the AI models, not on the human intelligence. That's already happening, right? But similarly on the AI side, where these models are going through Reddit, and I think they're getting better at understanding sarcasm. But when they're overfed, this text, yeah, it's going to then be less accurate. So yeah, it could be the next momentum swing. Mike, you had a question?
Oh, yeah, it was similar, actually. Let's say that you want to do a RAG, right, with a local model, and you don't want to train the frontier models, which is great.
Yeah.
What if all of your policy documents are like hopelessly out of date, and so it's garbage in, garbage out, right? You're looking at like a data retention policy that was, last updated 5 years ago. So how do you go about getting an organization to clean up the input to take advantage of this technique that you're showing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The garbage in, garbage out. I mean, it's like data science 101 that all our professors have taught us. And I think to your point, RAG is the technique for that. In with some of the classification that I was doing on the laws and regulations that are ever evolving with addendums or just new regs that are coming out, if you continuously feed them in to your model and use that a BERT method or a classification method, then in real time you should start seeing the degradation of your policies that aren't abiding by the new language of these regulations and the spirit of the law. And yeah, that's kind of like your indicator or almost like ML ops in place for you to go to your policies and update them accordingly. Now, the human should be doing that. And the human, along with the auditor, should be justifying the evidence of what you say you're doing in your policies is actually what you're doing, right? So the screenshots of, hey, we have malware protection. We took a screenshot, of our actual malware. Yeah, all right, good. And digging a bit further. So, at the end of the day, like AI is not the easy button. It can help with some of this arduous, paper pushing type of work and help us navigate where our gaps are in a better, more efficient way. And we should push on the auditors to do better as well because they're getting AI assistance. So now they have time, instead of reading through the 10-page, 100-page policy, they can use AI to help out, identify the quick gaps, and do the human in the loop verification and justifying. Let's go a step deeper. Yeah, you sent me a screenshot. Show me user's laptop and the latest version of the malware update to justify. Yeah, you've got malware protection. Yeah, it's up to date. Yeah, it's being used, and show me the last block that happened for this user. Like, let's do better. All from using AI to help with this particular use case.
That was a really good question, Mike. Great answer.
Thank you.
On MCP servers,
Yeah.
I feel like every vendor out there is like, oh, don't use an API to integrate with me, just have my MCP server, right? And everybody who knows me, I'm also a vendor, right? And my sales engineer always shows that MCP server. Now, I want to ask you as a practitioner, right? Do we really need all those MCP servers, like, and all those integrations, and making the integration so simple so there will be another, tool that looking at the source of our data and analyzing it? Like, I feel like we're getting too excited, and I wanted... Tom, what's your take on it?
MCP servers?
Yeah, I feel like every vendor out there has like a...
I feel it's going to keep me employed for a while. Being on the right team side.
Right.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
What's your take on it?
Yeah.
Like, how do we make it stop? Like,
Look, I'm with you. Like, there's a whole rage, no pun intended on my talk there, about MCP. But it at least starts us off on what a protocol should be, right? Of similarities in in this use case of using AI and integrating, and trying to make those integrations seamless and smooth, and hopefully as well as secure. Right now, is everyone abiding by the true JSON, RPC 2.0, way MCP should be working? Probably not. And hey, guess what? That's our job to ensure that there are security in place, and we need to push on this protocol to make it better, so that we can all use it. It can be efficient. We can integrate, and it's just like the other types of normalization out there. JSON, right?
Yeah.
Should we use it? I don't know. I think it was a lot better than previous before JSON, right? But yeah, this is greenfield. It's a new protocol. It's still figuring itself out, and the bigger vendors are jumping on board to use it.
Do you see that there will be one integration that you will control, kind of like a gateway for MCP servers, or you would still have each vendor bringing their own, making you?
I like the
their own?
former. I like the gateway. You keep it open source and not one vendor to rule all MCP. I'm a big open source fan. I've got the projects I talked about, but it takes a village. It takes a community in order to make it better. And it takes our red teamers out there to find those findings, also provide good defense, and make it public.
Oh, that's fair. Thank you.
Yep, great question. All right, I think we're out of time. Thanks, guys.
What?